Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Jamie Widener with my partners here, David Media, Chad Thomas. Welcome to lucky episode 13 of Paranormal Lens. And as you saw with our kind of swanky intro there, tonight we're going to discuss the West Virginia Penitentiary. We were chatting before we started. This is the first off-site or away investigation that all three of us have made it to together. It was a little over a year ago we were there, so it was time to revisit it. And it's been on my mind lately as far as a place I'd like to get back to. So I thought let's talk about it and revisit and go back around the bend with it. And here we are. So I'll just dive right in. The intro kind of gave away some of the stuff about it, but it's an interesting place because it is truly foreboding. It has large walls. I'll get into the size of that stuff, but it's a walled prison. It's not a fenced prison. It was commissioned in the newly founded state of West Virginia in 1866. West Virginia at that time had ceded from Virginia, created its own statehood, and they did not have a prison for anyone at that time. So it was kind of a lawless land out there on the western end of the Virginia area, and they decided to put up this big prison. And it was built over the course of 10 years with prison labor. So those who were incarcerated, Chad, if you slide up one, it was a foreboding structure, as you're seeing here. It is a design modeled after the Northern Illinois Penitentiary in Joliet, Illinois. And if you don't know what that is, think of the opening scene of the Blues Brothers when Jake gets out of prison and Elwood's there to pick him up. He comes out of this huge castle-like looking thing. We're broadcasting near Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and the Lancaster County Prison is very much in this kind of stylization as well. It looks like an old castle. So it is a Gothic revival design with castellated features by definition. And again, simply stated, it was designed to be foreboding and miserable, and it did not disappoint for those who were sentenced there, as we'll get to. It officially opened, again, 10 years after it was commissioned in 1876. 251 male inmates were there. And again, most of them helped with the creation of the prison. The original facility had what was called a north wagon gate, because this was the 1800s. There were horse-drawn carriages and horses coming around. There were no cars yet. It was a place where people would come in and be able to get off their horse, leave it there in the stable area, and do business with the prison as they needed to. There was a north and south cell block, and the north block housed a kitchen, dining spaces, a hospital, and a chapel. And between the cells, there was a 4-story tower, which you see in this picture, that housed the female inmates. And there were very, very few. And also the warden and his family who lived on the upper floor, the top floor. Additional work was done to create various workshops. Obviously the prisoners had to have something to do. The shops included a carpentry shop, a paint shop, a wagon shop, a blacksmith shop, and a tailor shop. So there was a lot of, the old idle hands kind of moment. They wanted to keep people busy. And included in that was a brickyard and a stone yard, plus a bakery. So some creative stuff there being done as well. You go to the next slide. This kind of gives you an overview from the air of how big this place really is. Now, it was added on to, and I'll get to that in a second. So the original wall, which is kind of the line, kind of just a little off center to the right, shows the original part of the prison. The rest was added on a little bit later on. But it's still a huge property and a huge facility. There was additional revenue created for the prison. There was an on-site farm, which is part of what that large yard was, where that white roofed area is now, was open space back then. And also they used prison labor at a local coal mine, which the state estimated on saving about $14,000 a year. And in late 1800s, early 1900s, that was a lot of money by using prison labor and then selling the excess coal that they didn't use on the site for extra revenue. And turn the century to 1900, the annual warden's report stated that the prison conditions were good and the discipline of inmates had become nearly perfect. Now, I can't imagine that's true, especially as we go to the next slide. You start to see the physical shape of the place. Obviously, Some of this has been updated from the early days with the electronic cells that this picture has. Those cells are operated by a station at the middle of the block, down far to the left, and each floor had its own control board. So the doors would all open together and close together. The inmates would be given that time to get ready to go to the yard or to dinner or food, whatever it was, exercise and or medical care. Most inmates, though, lacked any formal education, and a school along with a library was built at the same year to help reform and educate the inmates. And the inmates were required to go to classes. You can imagine, late 1800s, early 1900s, there weren't, these folks were coming from rough and tumble lifestyles. They were in this, basically uneducated, and the thought was try to educate them and they'll reform faster or better. And not always the case. As good as things seem, they got progressively worse as the facility aged. And you go to the next slide, you'll start to see this is the maximum security wing, and you're starting to see some more overlay of various separation here. There's chain link separating the floors, separating the upper level so things aren't tossed down or falling onto people below. But overcrowding is starting at this point, and the aging on the strain of the limited systems put a whole big old was a problem, because now we're dealing with, instead of a prisoner or two in a cell, now we're dealing with three. And there's only two bunks in each of the cells that fold up. The third prisoner who was sharing that cell had to sleep on the floor. And if he wasn't careful, when the doors closed for lockdown, if his feet were anywhere near the end of the doorway, they would get cut, or in some cases cut off. And amputees happened here because of that. So it was way, way uncomfortable and crowding and a very unhappy place to be. Eventually, that glowing endorsement that the warden gave in 1900, eventually the prison would become one of the U.S. Department of Justice's list of top 10 worst prison facilities in the country. So West Virginia had a solution to the rise in violence and criminal behaviors, and that was to make the facility bigger. And this is the add-on that you saw 2 slides ago, where it now is this whole kind of complex adding on to the right side of the prison. That began in 1929, and then did not finish until 1959. So it took time, a lot more time, and not using prison labor, interestingly enough, that it took so long to do so. So stuff had happened there. One of the things that West Virginia, being a new state, it didn't have a whole lot of oversight laws. So they allowed capital punishment, and it was originally hangings. So there were, in total, as you saw in the opening part of the segment, 94 men were executed at this prison over the course of time. And that originally was hanging, and it was actually quite a public affair. Outside in the yard, very near the North Wagon Gate, where there now are basketball courts, there was gallows there, and an individual who was going to be sentenced. This Moundsville, West Virginia, is not a big place, and most people either worked at the prison or knew somebody who worked at the prison. They certainly were aware when executions were going to happen, and people would bring basically picnic lunches and come and gather and commiserate, obviously to see the person be executed, but also in a kind of a social gathering sense. It was an event day when it was happening. And, obviously the families of the victims would come, the family of the criminal would come if they were able. However, there was a day, June 19th, 1931, where a fairly obese gentleman named Frank Heyer was to be executed. And his execution went off as planned. However, his extraordinary weight, when the noose was tightened around his neck and the door dropped and the floor dropped off, he became decapitated. And that was the end of public executions for the general public to view. So that day is kind of infamous, and I can imagine the gore that went with that. And obviously people are bringing in their kids, and a whole family day kind of thing, and not exactly what you expected. Although, why would you bring your kids to this in the first place? All told, 85 men were hung at the prison before 1931. So that led to a period of probably about 20 years until beginning of 1991, when West Virginia started to utilize the electric chair for public executions or for executions of prisoners. Of course, they had to dub it Old Sparky. How original. I think every electric chair ever has dubbed that. And then that was their means of capital punishment until it was officially outlawed by state legislature in 1965. And in that window, 9 men were executed. Actually, go ahead, go a slide there. This is a picture from the lobby of the prison of all of the men who were executed. The only picture that's missing, you'll see, is the second or third one up from the top left. And that's because that gentleman, they didn't have time when they executed him. If you can, and it's really very hard to zoom in on this, but one of the things that I found really interesting about looking at this picture, of course, is that they're all wearing suit type, jackets and ties and so forth. But if you look really closely, especially being there, you'll notice that the dress shirt that they're wearing ties to is their prison overall. So they got gussied up, if you will, for this picture, which was going to be their last one. But they are, still fully incarcerated. So this part of, the 94 deaths is a significant part of, the activity, I believe, at this facility. However, it is not all of what's gone down. We had the privilege, Chad and I specifically had the privilege of taking the day tour before the investigation that evening. And one of the things that, the guy doing the tour is a former prison guard, and, the facility only shut down back in 95. So it's not that long ago. It's been used for training as for state police and so forth since then, technical teams and so forth. But one of the things that struck me was that there are at least 2,500 additional deaths that happened in the facility from prisoner to prisoner violence. And I thought that was really significant because, the length of time and the amount of energy that went through this facility based on all that violence, is pretty heavy there, and you can still kind of feel it. And of course, that's not the only thing. So there are some other instances I thought worth noting. First and foremost, there was an actual prison break. And this is not the Fox show from back in the day. Back on November 7th, 1979, well within my lifetime, 15 inmates escaped. And all were quickly recaptured except for a fellow named Ronald Turney Williams, who managed to get outside, and in doing so, got a service revolver from one of the guards. And there was a fellow coming by the prison that day with his wife named Philip Kessner, who was an off-duty West Virginia state trooper. And he saw what was happening. He understood it, and he worked to try to capture Mr. Williams. And in doing so, Williams shot him, and eventually, he died from the wounds a day or so later. So a violent escape, no less. One of the things that was really interesting about Williams while he was on the lam is that he sent several messages back to the prison, to the warden, kind of goading him how he got away and how he's out in the world. And he apparently went on quite a spree. He traveled through the Southwest. He was accused of a murder in Arizona during a robbery, some other crimes in Colorado and Pennsylvania. On his way back east were attributed to him, and he was eventually captured in a hotel room in New York City, kept alive, taken alive, and is still in custody to this very day. As of the 16th of the month, 2 days ago when I checked on it, he's still in the West Virginia penal system and has no chance of parole ever now. So pretty interesting. That's a real crime thing. And the other thing that was really interesting is there was an actual riot. And this happened in 1986. Approximately 20 inmates, known as the self-proclaimed the Avengers, dig on the Marvel world there for all of us now. But they stormed the mess hall and in short order took over the guards there and overcame the guards and the bit of the staff that was working. The riot itself lasted for 2 days. And in doing that, the governor of West Virginia actually got personally involved and came to the prison, and it's not too far to come down from the state capitol to Moundsville. It's, it's not far at all. It's probably half an hour drive. So he came down and got involved. The inmates wanted better living conditions, better food, the usual stuff, of course, because now it's on that list of the top 10 worst institutions in the country. And they were given privy to the fact that the state was already working on building a brand new high tech, if you will, or a brand new facility offsite from the location in Moundsville. And the prisoners eventually surrendered themselves back. But in doing so, 3 more prisoners were killed in, again, prisoner and prisoner violence. So more and more deaths tolling up. So, with all this stuff happening, all this energy and activity, there are some significant paranormal claims happening. You'll go slide, please. There's old Sparky. So, and this is on display in the lobby. It's not, it's not they don't hide it in the back kind of thing. It's the front and center. This is one of the 2 or 3 original chairs that they had. We found the other ones actually in a storage room while we're investigating, which was kind of creepy. Next slide. So paranormal claims. This one's a big one. So this is a picture captured by a paranormal investigator named Polly Gear of what has become known as the Shadow Man. The image was captured in a long hallway separating from the main lobby and where the visitation spaces would be for people to come in and talk to prisoners, toward the cafeteria near the north gate area. This image has been tested by many paranormal teams, including us. We tried to recreate this, and it has never been replicated, and it's never been debunked that it's a fake. It's quite an interesting situation here because that where that image is, that is an actual door that's open. It's just propped open, leaning. We closed from left to right. So it is quite an interesting thing. It really does have the appearance of a person. Also, there were some claims of disembodied voices, cell doors closing, and as I mentioned, especially on the JK block, which was the first block picture we showed, that is all electronic. The maximum security one with all of the extra gates and fencing and so forth, that is basically shut down at this point. So the cells are propped open there. There's nothing opening and closing. And that is quite interesting. That's something that we found as well. Lots of shadow movement, odd light anomalies, and I don't speak, Dave. I know you're thinking orbs here, but no. But like colored light anomalies inside and outside the prison, and the feeling, of course, of being watched while on site. So I think we have some more video here, if you don't mind jumping into that, Chad. This is a share of a fellow investigator, some footage he was willing to share with us. Chad, you want to set it up, actually, since you got the connection?
Yeah, there's a couple different ones. It's my friend John Covey, who's actually on with us right now. He's got a couple different ones here. One I didn't pull, Jamie, was one you were talking about, actually, where they heard cell doors slamming in the background. But I didn't pull that one. I think this first one is red cell. So let me just roll it, and then we'll see what we come up with.
Let me move this K2 just to make sure it's not your phone. Let me move this K2 just to make sure it's not your
phone. So apparently that no that we all heard was not a real person. So I'm not sure if it was disembodied voice or an EVP. John, if you're on, let me know if you knew which way that went. So that one I found kind of interesting. This next one, John was in a cell block, I believe by himself, doing a burst EVP session. So let me just go ahead and play that one.
Did you kill anyone here?
Wow.
Again, with a lot of EVPs, they're not clear, but there's definitely something there. John was alone in that area. So it's sort of interesting that, they picked up something. Then I've got one more that I'll set up a little bit. John's a psychic medium. So while he was doing his tour, they challenged them to figure out where a certain inmate was killed. And as he was walking through, he got a sense that that a certain place that this was the place, and he was talking to somebody, and this is the response that they got.
Do you want to walk over on the other side?
I have them right here. I have them right here.
Yeah.
It was pretty clear. John, I want to thank you for sharing your evidence with us. If it's okay with you, I'll put the link to the whole video in the comments.
Yeah, that kind of falls to some of the stuff that we found too. And we had access to the maximum security wing, the kind of middle section, but not upstairs, the administrative area, and then all the way down through the JK block, which is the minimum security. And unfortunately, we couldn't go any further all the way down to the end. Plus, then access to both yards, the chapel area, and so forth, the basketball courts, which used to be the gallows. And the one thing, and I appreciate, John, you were going out on your own. I'm sure we've all done this before, where you investigate by ourselves, even though we know we shouldn't do that in an unfamiliar place. I found myself doing the same thing, and I drifted upstairs to the medical wing by myself. And as I was, kind of just poking through the rooms, I came to the first of 2 or 3 open spaces, big open rooms. And I stopped in one. There was kind of like a shelf to set some equipment down on, and I just kind of sat on the floor. And it was a fairly warmish day, so it's a flat roof. Some of the stuff I'm hearing is the expansion and contraction of the roof material, but like the popping kind of sounds of that cooling down. But what I also could clearly hear were cell doors banging. And I'm upstairs away from either block. Both are opposite directions of where I'm at. It was a really weird phenomenon there. And then this is kind of this story has become a running joke with us as a team. But we were part of the team. We all kind of split up, and there was, how many of us were there, guys? There's probably 15 of us, 20 of us even. A lot of us were team members, but also some friends and so forth. Came along on this investigation, and unfortunately, everybody kind of scattered. We didn't have a great strategic plan of where we all were going and who was going to be doing what. But some of us broke in different directions, and I remember hearing this story in the moment. But Melissa was our team founder. Melissa was investigating with our dear friend Chris Mendence, and in the kitchen cafeteria, and there was a very loud bang back in the cafeteria itself, which would have been like the prep and cook area. Chris turned and ran and absolutely bowled over Melissa, knocked her down to the ground, and kept running. So it's become a joke. And Chris, if you're around on this one, I apologize for bringing it up one more time, but it's still so very funny. Melissa was fine, but that was quite interesting because there's no equipment left. And there's no doors that are open. There's a few things you can get into, like the freezer doors are still open all the way in the back. But for that, even that would have been had something opening and closing to make that kind of loud sound. Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Yes, he ran her over, and we do have evidence. So we're keeping that separate, though.
Well, he has admitted to it. He's taken full
Oh, he's
responsibility.
owned it. Yeah, he's owned it, and that's why it's a running joke still. We can make fun of it. Luckily, nobody got hurt. But yeah, she was hot afterwards. So, and then one of the things, Chad and I, you and I, at the end of the night, we went down to the JK block, and we were there, and we had the whole block to ourselves. And as we're walking, down the lines, up the floors, and around the back and so forth, one of the things I kept noticing as we got further from the center was it appeared that there was something at the end of the block just kind of hovering back and forth. And as we would come around and start going back to it, then it wouldn't be there; it would be back at the other end. And I thought that was really interesting, kind of playing into the shadow play of that facility. And now, granted, there's some ambient light. The yard has light coming through the back windows. There's street lighting on the front windows, and this facility is right in town, so it's not like it's out on the edge of somewhere. There's stuff happening, cars are going by, etc. So, there certainly could be that, but there was a lot of it going on. And then one of the things, and actually going back to John's video of the or information about Red Cell, again, I'm walking around by myself. I come around the bend, and his cell was the first one at the end of that first floor block, all the way back on the right side as you're approaching it. And the really interesting thing is I come across Jerry and Melissa sitting in his cell, and they startled me a little bit. I startled them, of course, because it's dark and all that stuff. But they had a K2 out, and they were lamenting that they had no activity. So I decided to join them at least for a few moments, and I started asking some questions. All of a sudden, the K2 lights up like a Christmas tree. And that was the only activity that they had at that point with that device in that space. So, but asking questions about him specifically and about his engagement there, what he was doing and what he his reason for his activity. So we got his attention, which I thought was pretty cool. The guys, you were there too. What were your takeaways from the things that you experienced?
Well, I know that I remember with Jerry, it was the first I saw a shadow figure, because we were in the high security block with all this the wire, the chain link, and he a half body apparition up on the one level, and it was just surprised that he did. After we were in the cell blocks, there was a lot of activity that we could hear. It wasn't just the shadow figure. I remember hearing things, and then like you said, we would move, and then it would move around. And I thought the facility itself was pretty cool because if I remember correctly, that's the one that had the turntable door in the lobby.
Right. Yep.
And it's just an interesting layout. It's across the street from some old Indian burial mounds, which adds to the whole mystique of the area. Especially there was the diorama in the one area that the inmates have done of the Indians. So I think, historically,
isn't there a giant burial mound right across the street?
There is. Yep. It's huge too. It's bigger than the facility's height, and it's 4 or 5 stories tall.
Yep. So
massive hill.
If I remember correctly, Jamie, you also heard some stuff up in the hospital ward.
Yeah.
Because weren't you up there by yourself as well?
Yeah. I wasn't very bright that night. There was just like this. Unfortunately, no good quality EVPs out of this, but the kind of like the sound that something was there, the mumbling or some vocalization, but just not clear enough. And I'd call it a class C, probably, maybe even a D. It's just enough to know, but not enough to capture it all very clearly. And actually, that's when I went to find you because I wanted someone else's opinion of what I was hearing, and then we wound up just kind of drifting off. One of the Dave, I'm sorry, I'm taking over your spot here. Just what do you think? What do you see and what do you feel besides lots of chip sounds?
Oh, I trust me, I don't need to talk. I spent most of the night frustrated that night.
I know.
We got nothing, and like the story is well documented. I got a whole bunch of like. The only thing that I really got that night was when our group was in the long hallway, and we were looking down, and we had the figure. You could see through the portal, the glass window in the door, and it looked like somebody was walking back and forth. And we've got pictures of what looks like somebody kind of looking out and then pulling back and then looking out that we can't really explain. So that's really, yeah, I didn't get much of anything anywhere else that whole night. Like I said, that night I spent most of the evening frustrated due to the group that we were with and the relatives. Like, it's a long. When you were describing the facility, it's actually the West Virginia State Penitentiary and the Ohio State Reformatory is what the Shawshank prison is based upon for the movie, The Shawshank Redemption. So if you can imagine, it's just all steel and porcelain and bars and concrete. So every bit of sound that you make echoes from one end of the place to the other.
Yeah.
And it's just this long, and really, when you look at the picture, it doesn't really give you a scope of how big it is, how long it is, and just the fact that any significant sound you make at one end will echo to the other. I had an experience in Red Cell, much like you did with, much like Jerry and Missy did. I was sitting there in the dark, and you said, when you came around the corner, that you startled them. Well, I was sitting in the dark, and Albert and
Heather,
his wife, I can't think of his wife's name.
Bert and Heather.
The Lynches. Albert and Heather came around the corner, and I was just sitting there like some creep in the dark, and in this cell, and I thought he might have died. I frightened him so badly because you couldn't. It was very difficult to try an EVP or to do anything significant because there were just people everywhere. And once we opened that interior door, it was like somebody turned on the light and the cockroaches just went all different directions. And there was just no real rhyme or reason. But the other thing that when it came to about the facility, famous prisoners is Charles Manson. There's a letter in the lobby from Charles Manson. Charles Manson tried to get incarcerated there because I think he's from West Virginia.
Yep. Yes.
And he appealed to the state board of, I think he's a federal prisoner, or whoever, to get incarcerated there, and he got denied. But that letter is on display in the lobby. That's really all we've got.
Some non-paranormal events we had. I believe we had a decent-sized bat with us out in the chapel.
We sure did. Biggest bat I've ever seen.
And then there was our Sugar Shack experience.
I'm trying to say I'm looking that up too, but I want to be as respectful as I can be. But oh my gosh, that's kind of fun. Yeah. So Chad and I wound up heading down to the Sugar Shack, and we come across two other investigators, and it's dark, obviously, and they have their little bit of light on, so we have a little bit of light with us, so we can see each other. But the commentary was that there is something happening activity-wise over in what would be the front wall left side of the room. And as we stand there for a while, we're right underneath, by the way, the lobby, which is our staging spot where everybody's gear is. And it's the place with lights on and a facility, bathroom. So, we can hear people walking around upstairs and I start to notice that somebody is walking across the floor in that general direction. Then I hear the sound of a door opening and closing, the screech of a door frame and hinge. And then a few moments later, the sound of water falling. And that point, that other investigator says, "That's the sound. There it is again." And he's trying to make contact. And I don't know if this is the point where I looked at Chad, because right after that came more water falling from well, first of all, it was the flush, and then it came the washing of hands, the door closing and opening and closing again, and the footsteps back across the floor. And I said to Chad, I think he thinks the activity is someone going to the bathroom. And if you're not tuned to that, maybe I get it, because we want something to be there too. I mean, that goes back to Dave's confirmation bias. All these, we've had that come up in every one of our conversations here. So we want something to be there, and I get it. But in the same way, I'm like, you have to be objective and like understand the surroundings, and the environment. And maybe he didn't use that facility upstairs. I don't know. I did, and that's why I know where it was. And I kind of general lay of the land, but it was quite comical. And unfortunately, unfortunately, they left shortly after, and Chad and I were down there for a while by ourselves, and unfortunately, no one else used the bathroom, so we couldn't recreate it on our own. But that is quite an interesting space as well. The Sugar Shack was the kind of recreational space where inmates were allowed to go and almost be unsupervised. So it was quite somewhat of a lawless space. Some shady stuff happened down there, some activity. And it takes me to one of the things that I could not help but miss. Anywhere where there were prisoners in their cells or in their public spaces, where there is a hell of a lot of art created by inmates in this facility that's still there. And the Sugar Shack was no exception. There were pillars to support the room because it's a big open space. And on every pillar, there were murals, and large ones. Almost every cell at least, had some variation of the prisoners' thoughts for art. And some of it was quite vulgar and very, inappropriate. But a lot of times things were beautiful, very creative, very artistic.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Jamie. There's some that was just, it was amazing art. And it just, it's a shame that talent was locked up.
Well, and I said this to you that night, I think when we were still in the JK block and, walking through all the cells that way, and we can actually step into each and every one of them. I said to you, I think it would be really cool to come back to a place like there, come back to this place, but a place like this, and just do photography on the art, and make that be like a collage or collection by itself. Because I think it's quite impressive. And that goes to show, even though people can do heinous things to deserve incarceration, they still have talents and gifts that they can share in their own way. Obviously, who knows? They might have had other creative means that they were doing. Things left the facility. These are things just on the walls. But it's really neat perspective, and especially when you have time and nothing else to do. I mean, might as well be creative. Yeah. Sometimes it just oozes out of people. So, but there's a lot of it to see. And of course, we didn't see the whole facility while we were there. We couldn't get to every part of it. So I'm sure there's even more than I know. Any additional thoughts on the place, guys? You want to go back?
No, definitely. I want to go back. They do have some paracons down there. I'm not sure if you were going to get to that or not, but
I am.
Okay.
So first and foremost, here's the website. They have their own site. They have across the top a lot of things to do. Of course, there's just a walking tour. It takes about an hour and a half to go through. You'll start in the lobby. You'll move through the visitation center. Then you'll go through the blocks and so forth. Get outside to the yard where the executions took place, and it's all done by staff of the prison, former staff of the prison who come back around. Really well worth it. Interesting to see it in the daylight. I'm glad I did that first. And I honestly, I think that's, as we all get around the places, I think the daytime tour is really helpful just to get the lay of the land and have an understanding, because things are a little disorienting in the dark sometimes, just to get your spacing where you need to be. They do haunted houses in the Halloween season. And that part of that is down in the Sugar Shack off to the far end of it. Moving into the part of the prison where we weren't allowed to go. And I'm sure that's because that's set up as that as well. Think of the kind of the jolt and scare kind of stuff happening there. They have an escape room. You can book the place on your own for private investigations. They have group paranormal investigations. You can just go and be in a party of others, which is hit or miss sometimes. You never know who you're going to investigate with, but certainly it's more cost effective than having the place to yourself kind of gig. We have to have a lot of people to make it cost effective, but really well worth it. And they have a gift shop, so you can get stuff. So
If you're a police force and you need a place to go training, they do training there
Yeah.
with their police forces.
Absolutely, you get the whole penitentiary to yourself. So that's a really cool thing. And then also the next slide, we'll talk about the Paracon that's coming up in September, and September 9th at the facility. And then as John alluded to in his post earlier, there was going to be a investigation afterwards that evening. So well worth it. There's plenty of Moundsville is about from where we are in South Central PA. It's a good 4-hour drive, so it's not an easy in, easy out kind of thing. But there's places to stay in Moundsville. There's plenty of other stuff to stay nearby. It's a town. It's not a city. But there's plenty of stuff there. The usual things you'll find: hotels, restaurants.
Well, Columbus is right down the road too.
What's that?
Columbus, Ohio is right down the road. It's 40 minutes away.
Columbus is probably 3 hours away due west. It's
From
across.
Moundsville?
Yeah, it's across the state. So there's honestly not much on the Ohio side for a little while. It's kind of, and this is that sliver of West Virginia at the very peak. So it's a very narrow point.
2 hours.
It's a little while.
One thing, Jimmy.
Oh yeah. I drove down there. I thought it was closer.
You and I think you got to take part in this. We got locked in a cell while we were on our tour.
Yes, we did.
That was an interesting experience.
Don't want to do that again.
No.
You think 5 by 8 is pretty big. It's probably the size of your bedroom growing up, right? Especially if you were one of the latter kids in the line. And that's fine when you can come and go as you wish. But man, when that door's shut and all you've got is a bunk and a bath, a toilet and a sink, and nothing else, that's sobering. And that's how people live for years, if not decades, at that facility. And no, thank you. Not cool, not at all. And that's scared straight, pun intended. Yeah, that's another cool part of the tour. That you got to see how the kind of center console controlled everything. You could open single doors or multiple doors. And the regiment that the inmates had. When they had to go places, the bathrooms are in the stalls, but the showers are open air. Kind of thing. There's a brick wall, but if you're on an upper floor, you could see the person showering down below, and there was minimal privacy at any point as an inmate there. That was really interesting. Not cool. So, well, guys, that's about all I have. It's a place I'd like to get back to. Again, I think that it's worth revisiting, and I think there's a lot more to do there, see there, than we were able to capture. I agree with you 100%, Dave. We needed a better plan. We needed a plan in general before we started that night, and everybody was so excited to get started. Once they opened the door, everybody kind of just went, and we didn't talk. So that was a strategic moment for all of us, I think, to learn from. I agree with you. Every time we turned a corner, it seemed like someone was there, hence to try to get away. But having access to both north and south blocks, having access to the administrative facility, having access to the hole in the sugar shack and both yards, the chapel, there was enough space to spread out a bit. You just had to hopefully get lucky that no one else was there before you, or at least not intrusive when you got there yourself or they got there. So, but it's a huge facility, man. It is just so cool. And I really look forward to getting back again sooner than later. So maybe we'll see John in September. Who knows?
Maybe. Yeah.
And John, thank you. Thanks for sharing your information, your videos with us. It's a really well done piece you've got. I haven't seen all of it yet. I'm looking forward to it. Chad shared the link with me earlier. I'm looking forward to sitting down with it and getting the full depth of it all. Thanks for the work you've done and you're continuing to do in the field. Appreciate you.
Okay.
All right, guys. Let's wrap up the episode then.
All right. You've got the JOTT-NYX Paranormal upcoming events. So on the 22nd, which is this Saturday, we have a public investigation at Boobies. The following Saturday, we are headed to White Hill Mansion in New Jersey with our JOTT-NYX New Jersey group. We just had an investigation last night, actually, with them at Crescent Sanitarium out near Altoona, Pennsylvania, and we'll be heading down to White Hill with them this coming Saturday. Then the following Saturday, we have another public at movies. And then August 11th and 12th, that would be the following Saturday and Sunday. I'm sorry, is that Saturday and Sunday? No, it's Friday and Saturday. We have the Hinsdale House in Hinsdale, New York, outside of Olean, New York, and the Wildwood Sanitarium, which is relatively close up there. I think it was an orphanage and a sanitarium as well, so that should be a good time. The 19th, the week after that, we got another public. And then we are going to finish up the summer on September 2nd on on Labor Day weekend with Daryl Marson at the Red Mill Museum Village, where we'll be hosting, and Daryl will be hosting, and we'll be running the event. JOTT-NYX and a couple of other teams, or at least a couple of other investigators, are going to be hosting an overnight event. I believe there's going to be camping. Is that the truth, or that fact, or is it just an overnight with a fire pit and so on?
Yeah, we're gonna have a little break in between some of the.
I don't remember if it's going to be public.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no break. There's no break between now and September 2nd.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy August, that's for sure. Let me see if I can find that slide. Talking about that one.
I know that we're going to have campfire stories.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited about that. I met Lourdes, and I can't remember the guy's name, who are going to be there investigating. They have a new. It's sort of like a spirit box, but they're doing it differently. They're using white noise. They're filtering it and they're slowing it down. They actually showed it at Gettysburg, or showed some clips from it at Gettysburg this week. And it's very interesting. They're getting almost, and you know how with the spirit box you get chopped sentences because of how it scans through the radio frequency. They get 3 or 4 sentences at a time in this device.
Wow.
So it could be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing their equipment and how it works. And they're still in development with it, but it looks really, really interesting. So that I'm looking forward to that. So sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there, Dave. I just remembered that. And
No, by all means. I'm foggy on some. I mean, you were down at the Bash this week and in Gettysburg, and meeting folks and I'm assuming, is that where you met them? Was down at the Bash?
Yeah, they actually did. They did a speaking. They did about an hour speaking engagement with their equipment. So it was pretty cool. And then for us next week, since we're going to White Hill Mansion next Saturday, we're going to be focusing on White Hill Mansion. We're going to have a special guest next week. His name is Kyle Mangus. He's the vice president of the Friends of White Hill. So hopefully we'll be able to get some first person information from him. I know you were there, Jamie, but he's there quite a bit from what I understand. So it'll be interesting to see what he has to say.
It's a busy place too, and they have we'll get into this of course, but the access for the public to get there. The Friends organization is really working very hard to keep the place actively open, so that we can come and do our work there and the things that we love to do. But also and this is kind of like going back to the JOTT-NYX roots at the Haldeman Mansion, where we were utilizing our access to the facility to help them raise money by doing the paranormal investigations there on the weekends, to help renovate and restore the property, because that place is ages old, and it's not falling down, but it's certainly it's seen better days. And all the pennies and nickels and dimes add up to dollars that they can raise through us being there and other groups like us. So it's really cool, and I'm looking forward to Kyle's perspective of what they're up to.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, do we have anything else this week, or we want to call it a wrap?
Just the usual ways to find us, and keep giving us the likes. Our TikTok is up and running officially and formally now. There's been some good video content added to that lately, so go over and give us a follow there. Keep up with what we're up to, or we're
Oh yeah, we We had a live last night from Crescent Sanitarium, and so a lot of. I mean, from what I've heard, there has been just in the last 24 hours a bunch of content actually posted to it. So it looks like that's alive and well and working for us now.
Yep, I agree.
So,
All
okay.
right, gentlemen. Lucky number 13 in the books.
All right. Well, until next week then, guys.
Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing y'all then, if not sooner. See y'all Saturday.
Yes, yes.
All right.
Thanks
a
everybody.
lot.
Everybody stay safe.
Night.